So the theme for this morning's little talk is why insight isn't enough, and maybe what is enough. And I'm just going to walk you through some of that. So this is something I'm sure most of you have experienced, that you understand your pattern. You've identified that you are a people pleaser. You know you have difficulty saying no, for example. You tend to disappear when somebody's upset with you. And you know that when you're in conflict in a relationship, you immediately start wondering what you've done wrong, as if it's your fault. Maybe you've also been to therapy, you've read books about attachment and trauma. You can trace the whole thing back to your childhood. That's great. You know your mother was emotionally unavailable. You get it, like intellectually. And yet, when somebody's upset with you, or somebody you love is disappointed in you, it's like you default. There you are again. You're apologizing, you're explaining, you're backing down, you're going silent, you're taking care of them, you're omitting yourself, you're leaving yourself out. And then you think to yourself, I know this one. Why the hell am I still doing it? Like, what is going on? So I'm going to talk about that today, because obviously this is my own story as well. So partly it's a matter of, the practice is partly a matter of becoming, is a mindfulness practice. And we go into that in the course material as well. But I'm developing a program or a protocol, which I've talked about, called the CUB dissolution protocol. And CUBs, you may remember, are core unconscious beliefs that developed early in response to mistreatment, like I don't matter, I don't belong, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, I'm not legitimate, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, etc., etc. And then these CUBs start to act as interpretive filters for your experience. So somebody does something or raises their right eyebrow, and when it passes through the CUB, you're sure they're saying that you're a nobody, you don't matter, et cetera, et cetera. And that actually becomes your reality. So we want to dissolve these. So it's not like I'm developing some sort of 8-step psychological technique. It's actually the opposite of that. I just want to show you why insight isn't alone, why we get stuck repeating. And essentially, the behavior that we've established through the CUBs is actually trying to accomplish something. So let's start simply here. Imagine that you're upset with your partner, or it could be your close friend. They've done something to hurt you, and you know you want to tell them, but you don't. Instead, you tell yourself, well, it's not that big a deal. Maybe they had a hard week. I don't want to make things worse anyways. Things are already a little tense. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. And then before long, you've talked yourself out of your own experience. So the sin of self-omission is sometimes what I call it. And that's what we call people pleasing, but let's get more curious, because there's a reason that you do it. You're not crazy, you're not defective. Your behavior has a deep intelligence. And because at some point, probably early in your life, you learned that staying quiet accomplishes something critically important for your survival. And I call these something importance, these behaviors, CABs, which are core adaptive behaviors. That's what the apologizing is about, the over-explaining, the fixing, the caretaking, being silent, working too hard to fix it, being agreeable, making yourself indispensable to everybody. Again, these aren't random behaviors, they're strategies. Even if they're unconscious, they're still strategies. And it's not so much that we want to get rid of them, but we do want to become conscious of them. And so here's a question that you might want to take away for this week. What does this old place in me, this historical place in me, the conditions which caused me to believe this, what would happen right now if I simply showed up as myself? Like if I didn't do those adaptive behaviors, you get it? So just, sit with it. So the question is not so much, why am I such a people pleaser? And you can hear the little criticism in that, the judgment. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? And it's not even, how do I stop doing this? But just, what is some old place in me? What does this old place believe would happen if I simply showed up as myself? Natural, spontaneous self. So we go back to the example, right? You're angry with your partner, but you stay quiet. So then imagine doing the opposite, just in your imagination. Imagine challenge, going to your partner and saying, actually, I'm angry about what happened, about what you did to me there. And then notice in your imagination what happens to you. So there probably will arise anxiety. Like I've got a buddy, he's not a buddy, he's kind of a new friend. He's staying in a studio with us and he's doing some carpentry work for us. And I felt really disrespected by him in an exchange probably 2 days ago. And I've thought about, talking to him about this, and I've noticed the place in me that's really resistant. So then I'd have to ask myself, well, what if I did what I wanted to do, what I know I should do, which is to talk to him, get some clarification so it can be cleared up between us. And then the anxiety came up. And so I had to track, what is this anxiety about? Why am I resisting this? And part of it was that I don't trust my inner experience. And that's part of how this people pleasing thing got formed. I don't trust that what I experienced is what was actually happening. And I want to be right about my experience before I talk to him. So I have to get it just perfect. And I think this is an expression of not feeling legitimate, ways in which this self-omission happens for me. So what are you expecting will happen? Because remember, the brain is a prediction machine. It makes predictions about what's going to happen in the future based on what did happen in the past. So you might say, well, he'll withdraw, he'll get cranky. And if he withdraws, well, I'll feel abandoned. And if that happens, and eventually you might arrive at something like, if I reveal what I actually feel, I risk losing love. So that would be a cub. I would say the deeper cub beneath that, even this deeper unconscious, core unconscious belief would be, I don't matter. I don't matter. I can be left if I am who I am. But that's what we're going for. And it's not so much like this is a belief in the ordinary sense. You don't wake up in the morning thinking, I believe that revealing my true feelings will cause people to abandon me, but it's there. It's deeper than that. It's as I say, it's a deeply embedded prediction. If I disappoint people, they'll leave. If I'm angry with them, they'll humiliate me. If I say no, I'll be labeled selfish. If I need too much, I'll be rejected, etc., etc. And for the life of one who's in the grips of this, the prediction feels like reality. That's the truth of it. And then if you want proof that that's the reality, you can look at your whole entire history and you see, well, when I did that, you see what happened when Joe did, and you can come up with ways in which your experience, because the unconscious cub was in place, validates your experience. So it's a self-sealing loop that we catch ourselves in. And so that's why you go to a therapist, and the therapist says, well, or you say to the therapist, my mother would always withdraw when I disappointed her. And maybe the therapist responds by saying, what, your husband isn't your mother. And you say, well, yeah, I know that. But your nervous system and your brain don't know that, not yet. And this is why all the positive affirmations typically don't work either. Like, you're just covering it over with my needs matter, looking into a mirror and saying, I deserve love, I'm worthy. I mean, I got nothing against positive affirmations, but if they're done on top of these undisclosed, undissolved beliefs, the underlying unconscious beliefs will win every time. The deeper this deeper system will say, well, that's all very nice, but I'm still not telling this person I'm angry with them. So then in this protocol, what happens is that you look for the anomaly. You look for the exception in that dominant narrative. Instead of arguing with the belief or using positive affirmations, you look for something happening in your actual experience, in your recent experience, in your history, or even say with your therapist, that the old belief can't adequately explain. So your old cub says, if I say no, people will reject me. But last Tuesday, you asked somebody for something, you said, or somebody asked something of you, and you said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available. And they said, hey, no problem. Let's play tennis. Well, it's interesting because according to the old model, saying no is going to result in some catastrophe. Or maybe you have a belief, if I tell somebody what I actually feel, if I reveal myself, they'll withdraw from me and go silent. But last month, you finally told your wife something that was real and difficult that she did that hurt you in some way. And instead of withdrawing, she said, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I did that. It wasn't my intention. Let's talk about it. Again, it's more than just interesting. Reality is actually giving you new data points, something that the core unconscious belief didn't predict. And it can happen in a therapeutic relationship as well, when the mistreatment you experienced in the past is not happening. You're not being shamed by the therapist. You get angry, a therapist holds space for you. You can even attack the therapist and the therapist stays connected. It's like, what the hell is that? That's weird, right? In terms of the old experience. So you got to, then the nervous system, the brain have to be updated with this anomaly, this anomalous experience. Or your history says, if somebody actually sees me, and lots of people are like that, the more you pay attention to them, the more they recoil, because they get closer and closer to this root of shame that is causing the unconscious beliefs. But then if they hang in there through this experience, they realize this person wants to be close to me, but they have no interest in shaming me. Revealing myself doesn't result in humiliation or punishment. That's the anomaly. And then what happens typically, in my experience working with people, is that they'll discount this anomaly. They'll say, yeah, but you're my therapist. Like I had the experience myself. I was doing LSD actually with my therapist. I was doing the LSD, not him. And I looked at him directly in his eyes. I said, are you doing this because you want to be here or because I'm paying you? And without a hitch, he said, I'm not a prostitute. And I could feel my nervous system, my brain going, oh, he's doing it. Like, I can't buy him off. He's not doing this because I'm paying him a couple $100 an hour. It's like, what? And, with the help of the medicine, it was like, I got to update. This guy wants to be here with me. And then all that came up was like, this is what it feels like for somebody I care about to want to be with me. Oh my God. And then the grief comes, right? And this happened because of this anomalous tension that was created, the old with our actual experience. That's the secret, I think, of updating our nervous system and our brains with new information. That old prediction is not working anymore. What might be true then? If that old cub, that prediction is not true, what else is possible? What future could I generate now if I wasn't living in the past with that prediction? And then you can work with core unconscious belief and all the satellite beliefs that are nested under that core unconscious belief, and then move to the next, and then move to the next, and then move to the next. And this is why I talk about healing is not getting rid of all that. Healing is experiencing an increase in the degree of freedom that you have to curate a new life, a different future, so that your future is not determined by the worst that happened in your past. So healing is increasing freedom in your life, experiencing that you can not limit your possibilities because of the templates that you formed through no fault of your own in the past. And then all this, like, because these cubs are a possibility filter, they limit the possibilities necessarily because you're into survival. But then once they're dissolved, it's like, oh, reality is this big. Oh, actually, oh, this is an option. I could ask for this. I actually prefer it this way. I can say no, I can say yes, and I can survive whatever the reaction is of the other person. I couldn't in the past, but I can now. So the trick here is you got to hold the contradiction sufficiently. Like, here's what the cub is telling me, but here's my actual experience. It's like, and then something happens in and of its on its own accord, where you pop up into this sort of trans-rational dimension where new neural pathways have been laid down, and you're no longer imprisoned by that particular belief. So we just can't rush to resolve that anomaly. You've got to leave enough tension, like, for example, for the grief. And if there's grief for how you were set up, then organic self-compassion comes online. And then the deep kind of self-loathing that's set up by mistreatment, because we always determine that it's our fault, that is transformed into self-compassion. And we know what it feels like to be tender with ourselves. So here's a practice for the week, just an experiment. So you're not going to try to change yourself. You're just going to notice, and you try to catch yourself once over-explaining, apologizing, fixing, performing, staying silent, hyper-vigilant scanning of the room to see, what other people are thinking. And just stop for a moment and put your hand on your heart, maybe, if that helps. I find it does. And ask yourself the question: what does some old place in me believe would happen right now if I simply showed up myself? Is there anything, and then hold that there, get it, and then is there anything happening in my life right now that old belief can't explain? And just deeply pay attention. And so this process is a little more elaborate, but it's powerful. And this is what I'm teaching in the 12-week Live Your Own Life intensive, and what the next cohort's going to be. And my wish is that every person in there would have the experience of actually going through this process, identifying their particular core unconscious beliefs, the way they adapted, their core adaptive behaviors, and having one after the other dissolve so that they're more free to be themselves. Okay, I'll stop there. I'm interested in your questions, in what got stirred up, etc.